Shalom. We continue talking about commandments of Yeshua. Today we are going to talk about divorce, and this is still Matthew chapter 5. I would like to remind you that we found that Yeshua didn't abolish the law, but on the contrary, he intensified it. We found that. We also found that the teacher focuses our attention on motivation and thoughts. And we found one interesting and important thing. Even inappropriate looking is considered to be crime. This is what we found last Wednesday. And now it's time to think about divorce, about Yeshua's teaching. What does Yeshua say about divorce? This is what he says. It was said, "Whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce." It was said, whoever sends. Again, we see this word, "it was said," which is an indicator of certain oral tradition. And then we have whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. It was not written, it was interpreted, and this interpretation was mentioned by Yeshua also in Matthew chapter 19 verse 8, and I would like to read this interpretation with you. This is Matthew chapter 18 verse 8. Yeshua said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so." It looks like Moses permitted to divorce your wives. Well, let's see if he really permitted or people wanted to find some permission. Interestingly, in Mark, we have a little bit different wording. Let me read this, this idea in Mark chapter 10 verse 5. But Yeshua said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart," and now attention, "he wrote you this commandment." Instead of he permitted that, Yeshua in Mark says, "he wrote to you this commandment." In biblical law, actually, a husband has the right to divorce his wife, but a wife cannot initiate a divorce. And in Judaism, later on, 1,000 years ago, approximately like that, Rabbeinu Gershom ben Yehuda, he decreed that a husband could no longer divorce his wife without her consent. It was a big progress. However, divorce is still allowed in Judaism. In contemporary Judaism, the divorce procedure must be done in front of divorce experts. Must be done during the daylight time. It must be done when the husband and the wife agree to get divorced, both of them. And according to the rules which exist in contemporary Judaism, the procedure is not free. You have to pay for that. You get a bill of divorce, which is called get, and this is based on the regulations given by the rabbis. The rabbis, by the way of the Talmud, considered marriage as a holy contract, and the dissolution of marriage is an unholy act. So it's not encouraged, but still allowed. Reformed Jews believe that a civil divorce is sufficient for a marriage, and I would like to read a quotation from the website of Reformed Judaism. "If one partner believes there is no hope for reconciliation, divorce is the likely consequence. Judaism accepts divorce as a sad but necessary option for some couples. Once a couple determines they are no longer compatible, Jewish tradition makes divorce straightforward and simple." So, according to the Jewish tradition, it's a simple and straightforward process, and now Yeshua comes and makes this very complicated and absolutely it's not straightforward according to Yeshua. But before we talk about his teaching, let me refer to the law of Moses. And here is what we have. Deuteronomy chapter 24 verse 1 says, it reads, "Suppose a man takes a wife and marries her. Now, if she doesn't find favor in his eyes because he has found something indecent in her, he is to write her a certificate of divorce, hand it to her, and send her out from his house." As you can see here, supposedly, we have a sort of commandment or a certain permission. He is to write her a certificate of divorce. Looks like, according to English grammar, he is almost obligated to do that. And at the beginning of my presentation, there is a note which says that this is a TLV text. This is a TLV translation. And let's see if this text is translated correctly or not. Vehatav la sefer keritut. This is what is found in Hebrew. And this should be translated not like this. Yes, in King James Version we have the same. Then let him write her a bill of divorcement. This is what it says. But the problem we found here is this. It is not correct translation. Vehatav la sefer kerut means, and he will write, literally a sefer, a book or a document, keritut, of divorce. And he will write to her the document of divorce. This is how I would translate this literally. But the text doesn't say he is supposed to write or he is allowed to write. First of all, when we find in English translations that he is to write her a certificate of divorce, it's not in the biblical text. This is problem number one. When she leaves his house, she may go and become another man's wife. Wow, interesting. She may go and become another man's wife. Interestingly enough, again, it's a very, very inaccurate approach to the biblical text. When she leaves his house, she may go. Well, she is allowed to do whatever she wants. Look at this. New American Standard Bible says, and she leaves his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. Do you see the difference between she may go and become another man's wife and she leaves his house and goes and becomes? There is no may in biblical sentences. And as you can see, this makes a big difference. May is assumed, but it's not there. Does the bill of divorce cancel the marriage? This is Yeshua's answer. His answer is no. The bill of divorce allows no another spouse. This is what Yeshua says. Will the bill of divorce allow another marriage? Yeshua's answer is no. Now, suppose the second husband dislikes her and writes her a certificate of divorce and he hands it to her and she leaves his house. Or suppose the second husband who took her to be his wife dies. And then, let's continue reading. Then her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled. And this is something which puzzled the rabbis. Why was she defiled? For that would be the detestable before Adonai. You are not to bring guilt on the land that Adonai your God is giving you as an inheritance, says Moshe. And here we have our second problem. Here is problem number 2. And problem number 2 can be explained by apodictic and casuistic legal material. First of all, what is apodictic legal material? Apodictic is simple do or don't. Do this. Don't do this. Keep Sabbath holy. This is exactly how apodictic material works. Don't kill. You shall not murder. This is how apodictic text looks like. Casuistic is a little bit different. Casuistic legal material assumes that you have a situation which is described in the first part of the law, and you have the verdict, what to do in this situation. You have typically and or if, then the situation is described, and after then you have the verdict. Where do we have then? Our then sits in verse 4. Before, we have the situation that someone married a wife and decided to divorce and to give the bill of divorce, and there is another husband, and maybe this husband dies or also divorces her and gives another certificate of divorce. This comes before then. The situation is described before. After then, we read, her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that would be detestable before Adonai. Period. And then here is a comment. You are not to bring guilt on the land that Adonai, your God, is giving you as an inheritance. So the law sits after then. And the law is very simple and straightforward. If there is a situation when a lady got a bill of divorce and married another man, this woman cannot come back to her first husband. This is what the law deals with. That's it. So, this law doesn't prohibit divorce. It deals with divorce, but it doesn't allow divorce. And we do not see any permission, because the law deals with particular situation. And why does Yeshua say it's because of your hearts, because of your nature, Moses allowed that? Because Moses didn't say anything against divorce in apodictic style. Something like, don't divorce your wife, don't divorce your husband. Then he gave something casuistic. He explained the situation about divorce, and then he said, in this case, she cannot come back to the first husband. But can we use this law as a legal foundation of divorce? The answer is no, no way. The central issue is Moses, in fact, never allowed divorce, and it was only rabbinical interpretation. Somehow it survived, and in certain form it exists in the contemporary Jewish teaching and tradition, but Moses himself never allowed that. Moses didn't prohibit, and this is what Yeshua says, but the Torah doesn't allow divorce. Marriage, and here is the central issue, was an important institution in ancient Israel. If the society was organized by married couples, then divorce would represent chaos and desolation. And in addition to that, it is crucial that marriage and divorce provided a metaphor to describe the relationship between God and His people Israel. If you are married, then you are in the covenant. If you get divorced, you destroy the covenant and you cancel the covenant this way. And that's why in the New Testament the metaphor of God's spouse is applied to the church. We should understand that it is impossible to be holy and to break the covenant of marriage. It is impossible to please God voluntarily divorcing your spouse. It is impossible to stay in God's covenant and keep thinking about divorce.